We have already prepared our iOS application to be ready to start displaying maps and the user's location. It's time to do the same on Android. And on Android, we're also going to have to call the init method from the Forms map class. And we're going to have to do something similar to what we did with the info.plist, but we're also going to be needed to do something else. Let's start with calling the init from the Forms maps class. In the case of Android, we have to do it from the main activity.cs file. It is in here where we also find the init call from the Forms class with the Xamarin Forms namespace. It's right below where we want to do the same thing for the Xamarin.FormsMaps class and call the init method. This init method is also going to ask for the activity that is calling and the bundle. So we can pass this as the activity, the current activity, and the bundle that is being received on the onCreate method as the parameters that need to be sent to the constructor. This call then is going to be very similar to the call that is already here by default. We can save the changes and close this file. And now we're going to have to add some permissions, similarly to what we did with the info.plist file on iOS. Now, to update these permissions on Visual Studio for Mac, you have to go to your Android project, right-click on it, select Options, go to Build, and select Android Application. In the case of Windows, you have to also right-click on the Android project, but in this case select Properties, and select Android Manifest. In here you will see a list of required permissions or options for required permissions. Probably none of them is checked out, but we do have to check some of this. The first one that we have to check in is access coarse location, which will allow access to the location of the device by accessing cell towers. So this is not going to be very precise, but it's going to allow us to get some sort of location. We can also use access find location, which is going to use GPS and it's going to be much more precise. We should also check in access location extra commands, which will allow an application to access extra location provider commands. For testing, we can select the access mock location, which will allow to create mock location providers for when we are testing the application. We're going to need to access the network state as well, access Wi-Fi state as well, and finally, we're going to need access to the internet. So find internet and select it as well. These internet capabilities will allow the application to download map data when displaying maps into the application. Now this that we have already done, along with what we did in the previous lecture by adding some references through the Nuget package, notice that now inside of the references of our Android application, we should see some Xamarin Forms Maps packages that are referenced, as well as some Google Play Services packages. These packages that we referenced in the previous lecture, along with that init call from the main activity and these permissions that we have just set, pretty much allow the application to display a map and get the user's location. But so far, if we try to run this application, only a gray box will appear when we define a map. And that is because in Android, we have to obtain a Google Maps API key to be able to display Google Maps. So the next steps are going to be performed in a browser. I am going to use Google Chrome, you can use your own. But the steps that we're going to follow are going to get us that Google Maps API key that we need. In your browser, you will have to navigate to console.developers.google.com. This is in the resource of the lecture as well. And we're going to have to create a new application. So if you don't have any projects created yet, you may find a button that is similar to this one that says Create Project. And if you have already created projects before, you should see a drop-down menu right beside the Google APIs title. And when you click on it, this window will open. In here, you will have this Create Project button. Either option will navigate you to this page where you want to set the project name. In our case, it's going to be Travel Record App. We can click on Create, and then we're going to be navigated to a page like this. But you have to make sure that the project that you just created is the one that was selected, because currently another one is selected. What I have to do is select the project again so I can see this window, and then select the application that I have just created. If it's not yet created, all you have to do is wait for a couple of seconds until it is ready. Once in the dashboard for that particular project that you just created, you have to click on Enable APIs and Services, and here you will find the Google Maps Android API. This is the one that we're going to be enabling for us to be able to use maps inside of our application. If you select it, you're going to see this page. All you have to do is click on Enable. Once it has been enabled, the next step is to create credentials. Necessary for us to get the API key that I mentioned, we will have to link to our application. In this window, we're going to have to select that we are going to be using Google Maps Android API. Click on what credential do I need, and then we're going to see our API key right here. This is the key that we want to set in our project. So what we have to do is click on copy, and so it's going to be on our clipboard, and we can head back to Visual Studio to paste it. Something worth noticing before doing that is that once we want to publish this application, we're going to have to restrict this key and actually create a new key that will be available for us to use it on an application that is already published in the store. We're going to take a look at that once we publish our applications. Right now, we can click on Done, and we're going to head back to Visual Studio. Back in Visual Studio, what we have to do is set the value that we had just copied to a value that is inside of our Android manifest. Inside of the Android project and inside of the properties folder, you will see the Android manifest.xml file. In here, we have to set the value for the API key that is going to be used in the application. And we're going to be setting it inside of this application definition. You will see that this is very similar to SAML, but this is not SAML, this is XML. And in here, what we have to define is first some metadata, and we're going to be establishing the definition to be very similar again to SAML. And in here, we have to set the name that we're going to be using. To set the name, we have to do Android:name, and this is going to be equal to com.google.android.geo.api key. And then the value, we're going to be setting it like Android:value equal to, and it's in here where we want to paste the API key that we had just copied. And that's it. Our application now will be able to display information inside of the map instead of just a gray box. So to get our application ready, we had to add the references to a Node.js package, which is called xamarin.forms.maps. It also by itself added some references to some Google Play Services packages. We had to call the init method from the forms maps class, and we had to set some permissions. Finally, we had to go to a browser, navigate to the developer console for Google, create an API key for us to be able to use Google Maps, and paste it on the Android manifest. Once both of our applications are ready to start using maps, in the next lecture, we're going to start working with maps directly from shared code in our probable class library with this Xamarin Forms application.